Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour, and yes, that's right. We're back. We're back with the Truth Attack. So I got a lot of stuff I want to go through here in the first segment on current events, and then I'm going to get back into further discussion and analysis and review of the article, The Broken Tax System, which is available on the tax-freedom.com website and exposes the fraudulent nature of the IRS's enforcement and the DOJ's prosecution of the income tax as a direct tax under the 16th Amendment, which is all exposed as a complete and total fraud as a result of the congressional reenactment of the income tax under Donald Trump in January of 2018 is when it became active. It was enacted in December of 2017. So we're going to get into that, and hopefully in segments 2 and 3, let's go ahead and get right into this. We are the Liberty Works Radio Network, and we are dependent upon the members, the listening audience, to keep the network operating. So if you aren't already a subscribing member, we sure would appreciate it if you'd find your way over to the Liberty Works Radio Network, get signed up as a subscribing member. Even if it's as little as $10 to $20 a month, every membership helps, and we do need your support to keep the broadcasts coming, the network operating. And if you want to get fully informed on the maladministration of the income tax, well, you got a number of options. You can go read about it on taxfreedom.com. You can buy the $4 PDF pamphlet, The Simple Truth About Income Tax, at irszoom.com. Or you can buy the whole compendium, the 780-page American Tax Bible, which lays out everything from beginning to end and provides documents that can be used as templates to answer IRS correspondence and the DOJ in court. So there you have it. Let's go ahead and get into current events. Well, what happened today? Well, O.J. Simpson died. He's 76, died after an extended battle with prostate cancer. And I just wanted to mention this because I don't know if you recall, but in 1994, his trial was pretty controversial. And I wanted to point out that at the time, anybody who knew about Los Angeles, California, and the law there and the demographics of the population, everybody understood at the time that Prosecutor Gil Garcetti gave away that case when he moved the venue out of Santa Monica, which is where Brentwood, that was the judicial district Brentwood was in, and would have ended up with a mostly white jury, admittedly. He removed the venue from the district where the crime was committed and moved it to LA, where it was an all-black jury that probably wouldn't have convicted him if there'd been video of him doing it. So they gave away that case when they moved the venue. So where prosecution occurs turns out to be really important because the jury that you get decides the case. And if it's not able to be an impartial jury, you don't get a verdict that will consolidate the nation behind the legal resolution of the case, which is important on that kind of case. It shouldn't be a divisive result, and I think that's what happened by moving it out of Brentwood District, Santa Monica, and over to LA. It changed the whole trial. It gave away the case. The prosecutors never had a chance after that, and a lot of people told people that he was giving it away. So, enough on that history. Here we go. Inflation not going well. They got new inflation numbers today, and inflation has ticked back up along with the price of oil, which is still heading up, over 86, headed for 90. And that increase in oil, as I told you a few weeks ago, a month or so ago, last couple of months, as long as the price of oil is going up, you're not going to be able to control inflation because it's energy policy that's causing this cost increases, which is being misportrayed as monetary policy inflation. It's not really yet monetary policy inflation. It's going to be over the next year or so as the money's contracted to be spent or let, unless Trump's elected and cancels it all. But Biden, of course, is lying about it. He's saying inflation was running sky high when he took office and he's brought it down. This man is an absolute, either he is completely senile and can't remember anything, or he is completely dishonest and is just lying to the American people about everything. Personally, I think it's a lot of both. Because inflation, when Joe Biden took office, was running at 1.4% and hadn't been over 1.5 in any month in the previous 2 years. So Joe Biden is an outright liar. Inflation wasn't running sky high when he took office. It was at 1.4%. His energy policies of what have caused the price increases. It's not pure monetary policy. And until Donald Trump is put back in office and the policy becomes drill, baby, drill to restore preeminence of American energy, to get back the gas production and oil production that's been canceled by Biden through the canceling of the leases and the permits and the slow walking of permits that are approved. Until petroleum is brought back online at full capacity, you're going to be stuck with high prices that never go down. And if you don't get Trump back in office to do it now, it's never going to happen. Once the prices are baked in for a couple of years, they're baked in. But if you put Trump in office and he gets gas back down to $2 a gallon and diesel back down to $2.50, then the costs of the goods can come down with that energy decrease, but only then. So inflation doesn't look good, and it actually ticked up, and that means the Federal Reserve Bank isn't going to cut interest rates. So you're going to remain with an inverted yield curve, which is going to continue to starve Main Street of access to capital and cause more foreclosures, shutdowns, stress, and a deteriorating quality of life for the middle class in America, which is being pushed down harder and harder by Biden's economic policies, which are crushing the middle class with increased costs for the fundamental things you need in life: food, rent, transportation, basic stuff. And he's made everything more expensive by increasing the energy component of every single operation that exists in our society. From lighting your own home, to growing the agricultural produce, to producing the goods in the factories, to moving them on the highways, to putting them into the stores for sale, and to going to the store and getting them. He's increased the cost of every single step of production and distribution of goods in the country, all artificially done intentionally through energy policy that is insane. Let's shut down petroleum with no alternative except a promise to build more wind and solar. Oh, well done. Bunch of idiots. So FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, has expired, and Congress, for some reason, Johnson is leader of the House Speaker, is trying to renew the FISA bill. Don't renew it, kill it. This is the act that the FBI used to lie to the FISA court to spy on Donald Trump and his administration on false pretenses. And this is the court that, even after it was discovered they were false pretenses, continued to renew the warrants to allow further spying on the candidate and the president. So no, get rid of this nonsense. You already have the ability to spy on foreigners. We're going to take away the ability to spy on Americans. It never should have been granted in the first place because it's just a piece of legislation that gets abused, as we have most recently seen. And it came out during the week that Joe Biden and his administration have been secretly giving foreigners permissions and green cards and work permits, and then in foreign countries, off in Central America, South America, Cuba, the island nations, Haiti, they've been taking people in there, giving them the paperwork and the approvals, then flying them into Miami in direct violation of Title 8, Section 1324. I guess actually at that point they've been approved and it's not, but Where's the budget coming from to fly these people in? There's no money in the budget for this kind of nonsense. This is Joe Biden stealing money again to buy votes, flying illegals all over, well, into Miami, and then probably giving them bus tickets to go wherever they wanted to go. And the job reports turn out to be rigged. You're not getting great employment reports. You're losing full-time jobs. The jobs that are being gained are going to the illegal immigrants, the illegal aliens. Over 4 million have gotten jobs, while Americans have gotten less than 250,000 full-time jobs. All the jobs being created are part-time jobs that are being taken by people as second or third jobs to make ends meet. The reality is we're losing full-time jobs. It's the part-time jobs that are being created. Oh, yes, and of course, government jobs. Government jobs are being created. And they're hiring illegal aliens to do things like solicit voter registration and other nonsense. Oh, and surprise, a senior editor on NPR has come out in an essay and written that NPR is nothing but a, well, paraphrasing, a propaganda arm of the left-wing Socialist Party of America. There's a surprise. I don't know if you ever listened to NPR, but it only takes about 5 minutes to figure out you're listening to the American Communist Party broadcast under the government banner. How they're getting away with it, I don't know. But it ain't national public radio. It's communist public radio. It's as socialist as it gets. And the senior editor is now admitting that that's what the American people have been forced to fund for what, 30 years now? 40 years? Socialism. The Democrats' new philosophy. It's not democracy, it's imperialism from Tyrant Joe. Do as I say. Take the vaccine or lose your job. Yeah, right, Joe. Every single thing he does is a violation of law as a matter of policy. And of course, China has been abusing this administration for 3.5 years now. Janet Yellen's getting used like a $2 whore over there. First, they dosed her up with psilocybin hallucinogenic mushrooms. Then they took her out and got her drunk. And now she says they've agreed to talk. No, they've agreed to let you talk. They're laughing at you. They're laughing at you, pushing green agenda. They're laughing at you. They're building a new coal plant every week and bringing it online. Oh, green. No, they're laughing at you. She's getting used like a $2 whore, as is the whole Biden administration. They've sold out the foreigners for years. Biden is owned by China. Everybody knows that. And now he's got nothing but lies to run on. Oh, inflation was running when I took office. The crime is Trump's fault. I can't do anything about the border. Energy prices were high when I took office. This man is nothing but a liar from top to bottom. Like I said, he's either senile or a pathological liar, and I think it's a lot of both. And crime is not down. Oh, the statistics show crime. No, the statistics are baked. If the statistics show that crime is down, it's because they're not being reported or recorded as crime. They're not making arrests. They're not putting anybody up on bail. Those don't go down as crimes. So if you don't record the crimes as crimes, of course the statistics show the crime is going down. Because people have given up on waiting for the police or trying to get them to do anything about it. And it's only a little bit after that, when the guns come out and people start dealing with the crime on their own terms instead of letting the police let them get away. Okay, I think I hear the first commercial break coming up. Well, we'll be back in 5 with more. And again, I want to urge everyone to find their way over to the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com website, get signed up as a subscribing member, and we'll keep the programming coming. Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour, and freedom comes from God, not government. Ye shall know the truth shall make you free. God's true plan for mankind is freedom. Freedom derived and achieved through faith in God, not government nor man or any institution of mankind. If you misplace your faith in any entity other than God, your faith will be used against you to betray you and enslave you. Only God delivers freedom through faith in God, the Spirit, not in the stones of the institutions or the flesh of men. Only God delivers freedom. That's what's laid out in the Constitution. A government that represents and is forbidden from ruling. Okay, so last couple of weeks we've been going through my article, The Broken Tax System, Completely Exposed. It's listed on the www.tax-freedom.com website. If you want to read the article and download the pages, you can get all the evidence and the proof of what I've been reviewing for the last few weeks. Now, last week we went through your right to work and how it historically has been held by the Supreme Court to not be a taxable event. And we also went through how the IRS and the DOJ for the last 40 years have been arguing that anyone who says the income tax is not a direct tax under the 16th Amendment is making a frivolous argument. And I laid out how a series of circuit court decisions have been used to reverse the true holding of the Supreme Court, which is that the tax is not a direct tax under the 16th Amendment, but is a function of indirect taxation under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, where income is not the object of the tax nor the subject of taxation, but is the yardstick by which the amount of tax is measured on the earnings derived from a federally taxable activity subject to some impost, duty, or excise. But if there is no impost, duty, or excise, there is nothing to measure. You don't just tax the earnings as though they were all profit derived from an impost. Taxation on foreign activities and foreign persons and foreign imports. A duty, taxes on exported goods, or an excise, taxes on the manufacture, consumption, and sale of commodities within the country, like ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, on licenses to pursue certain occupations, like licenses to sell alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, and on the corporate privilege. But where no impost, duty, or excise taxing power reaches the citizen's right to work. There was no taxation of the American people's labor before the 16th Amendment. There was no taxation of the American people's labor after the 16th Amendment and before World War II. The first time the American people's labors were taxed was the Victory Tax in 1942, a temporary 2-year war revenue measure that was undoubtedly unconstitutional, but they got away with it. Because of World War II, they sold the American people under patriotic duty to sacrifice to save the world from the Nazis in the European theater and the Imperial Japanese in the Pacific. And the American people bought into it and did just that. But after World War II, the judges began perverting the written law and the Constitution with judicial legislation that rewrites critical statutes in an effort to make it appear as though your labor is taxed when in fact, by the words of the statute, it is not, nor by the Constitution can it be. And they have done this by claiming that the 16th Amendment created a new authority to tax without limitation. But the Supreme Court rejected that argument for a number of reasons. First of all, the word direct isn't in the amendment. Everywhere else in the Constitution where the power to tax directly is addressed, the word direct is used in the clause addressing the power. 1, 2, 3, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, where representatives and direct taxes that must be apportioned to the states, and 194, where no capitation or otherwise direct tax can be laid unless in proportion to the census. So both those clauses allowing and limiting the direct taxation have never been repealed or amended. The 16th Amendment doesn't contain the word direct, so authorizing a tax without apportionment and without proportionate imposition into the census means that it can only be indirect, and the limitation applying there is uniformity, not apportionment. And that's exactly what the Supreme Court held for all of these reasons. Direct isn't there. There's no enabling enforcement clause to write law to enforce a new power. A new power would create an irreconcilable inherent conflict within the Constitution, using the 16th Amendment to allow powers forbidden under Article 1. This kind of split in the legal foundation for the nation would result, of course, in the nation being split along the exact same lines the foundation is broken on. And that's where we are today. Half the country's socialists calling for taking the wealth from the rich, and the other half calling for the government to stay within the limits of power, and not understanding that the income tax isn't part of that power with respect to the labors of the American people. So the IRS has had on its website for over 40 years that it's frivolous to argue the tax is not a direct tax under the 16th Amendment. They're the ones with the frivolous argument, according to the Supreme Court, but this rebellion in the circuit courts has not been reined in by the Supreme Court for some reason. Primarily, I believe, because the American people are ignorant to the true facts. If the American people understood the Supreme Court is allowing this rebellion to go on, well, then they all wouldn't be able to point at each other and go, he said, she said. It's the circuit courts, it's not us. It's the district court, it's not us. No, it's all of them. So it is absolutely irrefutable that the IRS agents and officers operating today only assess the personal income tax as a function of direct taxation without apportionment. There's a policy statement, of course, in the IRS frivolous arguments document, is what is practiced operationally by the IRS agents and officers. They enforce a direct tax without limitation on all earnings without regard to any subjectivity to an imposed duty or excise, claiming authority to do so under the 16th Amendment. The constitutional fact, that the 16th Amendment never gives Congress the authority to write law to enforce any new power allegedly created to tax directly and without limitation. That fact, that there is no authority to write law for the power, is just ignored by the IRS, the DOJ, and the lower federal courts. But that's a fundamental, critical, and fatal error in the subject matter jurisdiction of the court to be able to enforce the claims. They have to be able to show, to take subject matter jurisdiction, one, a power granted to tax, which you can argue is the 16th Amendment. Two, an authority for Congress to write law to enforce the new power allegedly granted. And that's done with an enabling enforcement clause, which doesn't exist in the 16th Amendment and does exist in every other amendment where it was intended to create a new power that would be enforced against the American people, which was not the intent behind the 16th Amendment. The intent behind the 16th Amendment was to prohibit the Supreme Court judges from claiming that a tax was direct because of the source taxed, which is what they did in 1896. And the Fabian socialists of the 1900 era didn't like that, so they spent 20 years from 1896 to 2013 trying to get the 16th Amendment, and all they could do was get in what they wrote with no enabling enforcement clause. And that created no new powers, and that's what the court ruled, and that's how the tax system worked until before World War II. And it's only since the late 50s and early 60s the government has started maladministering the tax as though it were the second plank of the Communist Manifesto, which reads a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. That's where you find income taxation. That's where you find graduated taxation. And that's not constitutional. The taxation requires uniformity of taxation. Graduated tax brackets are not uniform. They break the American people into different classes. When you look into it, what you find is that graduated tax brackets were deemed to be okay by the Supreme Court in a series of decisions in the 1880s where they held that the power to use tax brackets was based on the power of Congress to discriminate against the inanimate articles of commerce and commodities subject to tax. You could also, it's a power based on the power to discriminate against the inanimate corporate person, which enjoys everything by privilege. So based on that, they deemed you could have brackets that taxed the entities at a greater rate if they made more money and a lower rate if they made less. But none of this ever applied to citizens. And it wasn't applied to citizens after the 16th Amendment. It wasn't enforced on citizens. It was only until the late 50s and 60s when citizens started self-adopting and applying it to themselves by filing a return and making a full disclosure, giving up their Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights, making themselves liable for a tax they weren't liable for because they didn't collect it, and it wasn't imposed on their earnings as taxable income. Because the tax in Section 1 isn't imposed on persons, it's imposed on taxable income. Taxable income is what is earned in an activity subject to an impost duty or excise. It's not everything you earn because of the 16th Amendment. No new powers are created, no new powers are made enforceable. The whole thing is a fraud. The whole thing is a fraud. It's all being done under a rebellion in the lower circuit courts, which use a series of lower circuit court decisions pointing at one another in a big circle of nonsense that lays it off on all these other circuit courts. And they never cite the Bruchaber decision. They just say, third party hearsay, the Bruchaber decision decided. But they don't quote the decision. They just say the Bruchaber decision decided it was a direct and unapportioned tax. And the Bruchaber decision specifically rejected that argument. That's not what they decided. So the circuit court is lying about it, and then they all point to each other who all lied about it too. And nobody cites the actual text of the Bruchaber decision. They just claim this is what they said. Well, why on earth would you go to the horse's ass for the gas and listen to third-party hearsay nonsense about what he said, she said, when you can go to the Supreme Court decision and read it yourself? You don't need to cite Collins or Broughton or Stearman or Lovell or any of the other cases they cite. Collins, Beckwith, Lovell, Broughton. Why on earth would you go read an inferior court's opinion about what the Supreme Court wrote? Why wouldn't you go read the Supreme Court's decision? Oh, because then you wouldn't be able to reverse the decision and enforce the second plank of the Communist Manifesto instead of constitutional taxation. The judges are committing treason. They're committing sedition. They're enforcing judicial legislation, not constitutional taxation. And at this point, most of them know it. They have betrayed the American people and sold you down the river to the Federal Reserve Bank slave plantation. Because that's where all the money goes. None of the money taken from your paychecks, none of the money sent in on April 15th goes into the U.S. Treasury to fund the operation of the U.S. government. It all goes to the Federal Reserve Bank, a private corporation, to collateralize the $35 trillion in debt owed by Congress to the bankers. Your labor has been used to collateralize the debt. You are placed in the role of a peon and a slave, not a represented sovereign citizen. And you are the sovereign because the Constitution establishes a representative government. And who do you think the government represents if not the sovereign? That's right. We the people, and the states are representative as well. We'll be back in 5 minutes. I hear the commercial break coming up. We'll try to move on with more after the break. Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network, and we're going to just get right back into it. I was just finishing up with evidence that the IRS and the DOJ and the federal courts have been enforcing the federal income tax as a direct tax under alleged authority of the 16th Amendment without regard to the fact that there's no authority to write law under the amendment provided by an enabling enforcement clause, which means Congress can't write any law. They can't be shown to the courts that Congress is constitutionally authorized to write law to enforce this new power. And that's a fatal error in the subject matter jurisdiction of the court. They don't have jurisdiction to enforce what they've been enforcing for 55 years. The whole thing is a constitutional fraud. And no judge or attorney has ever come forward to try and argue that there is an enforcement authority that can be associated with a new power allegedly created under the amendment. It doesn't exist. It's irrefutably not there. The only way to get there is to fraudulently claim it's connected to the Article 1 enforcement authority, which has Article 1 enforcing powers prohibited by Article 1. Now, if an Article 1 enforcement power is going to be used to enforce anything, it enforces the prohibition of Article 1. It doesn't enforce the imaginary, fictional tax made up by judicial legislation who added the word direct to their interpretation of the amendment, thus engineering an irreconcilable inherent conflict within the Constitution. The judges are using law to destroy law, and that's how you create chaos in a society. That doesn't result in peace and good order. It results in chaos. And that's what we have. It's been caused by the judges. They're the ones who have created the class warfare by applying different laws and different rates of tax to the different classes of American people, unconstitutionally defined literally by the tax brackets of the tax imposed of Section 1 in the income tax. Lower, middle, upper, elite, class warfare, forever on. One law for everyone, or it's not constitutional law. Which brings us back to the focus of the expose and the article, The Broken Tax System Completely Exposed, available on the taxfreedom.com website, and the beginning of our discussion, which is, of course, the new income tax law enacted in December of 2017, made effective as of January 1, 2018. And a little background on this. When the Democrats took power under Obama in 2008, they had 2 years, from 2008 to 2010, where they held the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. All three branches of the federal government were Democrat. But instead of getting together and writing the laws that they wanted to do, they all argued for 2 years about Obamacare. They claimed they weren't writing a tax bill. They claimed they weren't writing a single payer bill. And what they came out with after 2 years of arguing was 2,500 pages of nonsense that the court turned out it said was a tax, and which of course turned into a single payer system with the Fed displacing the states on a subsequent ruling. But they wasted the 2 years when they had all three branches, and then they wrote this lousy legislation that destroyed insurance for the American people who had it. You can keep your insurance if you like it. Yeah, right. BS, liar. Costs won't go up. It'll save you $2,500. Yeah, right. BS, you liar. So anyway, the Democrats wasted their 2 years. The Republicans were put in power in 2010 in the midterm election, and when they did, then the Democrats all came forward with hundreds of bills that they wanted to pass under the Republican House leadership, but which they never got around to under the Democrat House leadership. Now, to stop this nonsense, the Republican Congress passed a new law. The new law said that all legislation and bills that are brought forward to the House floor, before they can be brought forward to the House floor for debate, must contain within them and have a plain and clear declaration made on the congressional record constituting the constitutional authority statement for the legislation. and declaring the alleged clause of the Constitution granting, allegedly, the authority to be exercised by the new legislation or proposed legislation. So you have to put a constitutional authority statement on the record, the congressional record, before you can bring a bill to the floor for debate. And that, of course, immediately shut down all the Democratic efforts to bring forward legislation because it was all without constitutional basis. Everything they want to do is without constitutional basis because it's an unconstitutional expansion of federal powers that are never granted and shouldn't be allowed to be exercised. That shut down everything. So the House has a new law, a new rule. Before you can bring a bill to the floor, you have to have a constitutional authority statement. So when they wrote the constitutional authority statement for the H.R. 1 legislation in December of 2017, that Trump tax law that we're now under and have been under for 7 years and that will expire next year unless Trump is put back in office, to renew it, what was the constitutional authority statement for that H.R. 1 legislation? That basically, what did it say? What did they write for the constitutional? Did they write the 16th Amendment? Like the IRS has been enforcing and the DOJ has been arguing and the lower courts have been enforcing and the Supreme Court's been letting them get away with it? Did they write the 16th Amendment or did they write something else? Like maybe Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, the power to tax indirectly by impost, duty, and excise? What do you think they wrote? First, it should be noted that the reenactment of this code section, Title 26, United States Code, IRC, Section 1, tax imposed, where the tax is imposed on taxable income, not any person, as done exactly, again, in H.R. 1, which is, of course, and constitutes a reenactment of exactly the same income taxing power and scheme of taxation as previously existed under the previous version of the income tax law, i.e. the law that existed from 1984 to 2018, which is the version of the code in place, the 84 tax code. 86, the 86 IRC code provisions of Title 26. So they rewrote the same law, it's the same tax. Congress has simply adjusted the number of tax brackets, I think it was from 7 to 5, with different earnings thresholds and different tax rates associated with each of the new tax brackets, and with a new set of allowed or disallowed deductions and exemptions for everyone. Remember, this is all about implementing the limited state and local tax SALT deduction, which places like New York and California were getting away with deducting $40,000, $50,000 in state and local taxes, which knocked down their income and lowered their federal tax. And other states were only getting $1,000 or $2,000 in state and local tax deduction. So it was deemed unreasonable for liberal states to be getting 50 grand in SALT, while conservative states got 2 or 3, and they put a $10,000 cap on the SALT tax. And that, of course, immediately resulted in people starting to leave New York, California, Illinois, places that had those high SALT taxes that previously were deducted but no longer could be. They had to be carried as a burden. So it is essentially and basically undeniable that it's exactly the same scheme of graduated, bracketed, gross income taxation under Section 61, allegedly, of taxable income under Section 63. It's that same scheme which has existed since 1913. But supposedly, under this new law, nothing substantial or constitutionally foundational is believed to have been changed regarding the fundamental taxing power exercised, i.e., to tax income. And everything about the scheme is basically left unchanged, schematically speaking, being nearly identical to the law as it was before H.R. 1, the new law. However, the constitutional authority statement for the new law plainly states that the constitutional authority is not the 16th Amendment. It's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, impost, duty, and excise. It's proof positive from Congress itself that their intent was and always has been and still is to tax indirectly under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, which has no authority whatsoever to tax directly. None. None. Here's proof positive. There's no direct taxation under the 16th Amendment. Even if there was direct taxation before this new law, ever since 2018, it hasn't been. And it can't be argued or enforced in the courts as such by anyone who has this information. And the proof is on the website. It's in the article, The Broken Tax System. It's in the website. It's over at irszoom.com in the exhibit package that walks you through everything for just $20. There is no direct taxation under the 16th Amendment. There never has been, there never was. The whole thing is a complete and total fraud being perpetrated by the same socialist judges that betrayed you and started pushing communist socialism in the courts with things like Roe v. Wade and affirmative action and regulatory and agencies making law through regulatory powers. This is all ungranted stuff that this Supreme Court is throwing away, and this income tax needs to be thrown away too, because it is the core of everything wrong in America. The unequal laws, the different rates of tax, the class warfare, the division of the American people, the inability of Congress to represent the whole of the American people because they're compelled to pick one class or the other and can never represent the whole of the people. And as long as the courts allow the Democrats to get away with implementing and expanding unconstitutional federal powers in areas like energy, education, the environment, work environment, all the other places they've expanded into where they've got no constitutional business at all because those are state arenas. This all needs to be terminated. It's being done to you by the courts that have allowed this perversion of a limited representative government to occur and have turned it into, through their perversion and subversion of the Constitution and the betrayal of their oath to uphold it, they've turned it into the system of class warfare, which is exactly what the Communist Manifesto calls for in order for the elite, the Politburo, the wealthy, the connected. It's the 10 steps for them to take over and rule the country, collectively socializing everything, and ultimately, of course, imprisoning or killing all the intelligence in the country. Because socialism produces nothing. It steals from the productive and passes it out. And ultimately, you run out of wealth to steal. And at that point, the government has nothing left to do except enslave the people to the diminished quality of life. You want to see the different stages? Look at Venezuela, where it's just broken down. Look at Cuba, where it broke down 50 years ago. Look at communist China. Socialism destroys and enslaves. It doesn't share the wealth, it destroys it. This is the fundamental fallacy in the teaching of socialism. It doesn't share the wealth, it destroys it. Wealth only exists when it's accumulated and can be leveraged to do business. When you pass it out, it goes to drugs and alcohol and cigarettes and parties. Oh, yes, and vacations, of course. Let's not forget. Okay, I think we're coming up on the end of the show here. Constitutional authority statement for the new law says Article 1, Section 8, the 16th Amendment is a lie. It's been a lie for 75 years, and it's time the American people woke up and realized what that means. The courts are cheating you, they're robbing you, they're stealing you, and now they're bankrupting the country by running the currency out. As goes the currency, so goes the fate of the nation. This is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. We'll be back next week with more, as I've still got a couple of pages that I want to read about this article, which I've been narrating a little bit more than reading from, but you get the picture. We'll be back next week with more. Thank you.